Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today, I am joined by Rabbi Shalom Fishbane, Executive Director of ACO and Kashrus Administrator of the Chicago Rabbinical Council. Thank you, Rabbi Fishbane, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Today, I'd like to discuss the topic of Cholov Yisroel.
Okay.
We've touched on different angles of Cholov Yisroel in the past. Ramosha's heter with regard to what we'll call Cholov companies is quite well known in the Chuvas, and there are people who are makpid on Cholov Yisroel nonetheless. And it's come to our attention, following the trends in the kashrus industry, that there are actually aspects of Cholov Yisroel that it would behoove people to eat or drink only Cholov Yisroel because they are going to avoid certain other kashrus concerns or considerations. Right. Well, I know that you've done research into this. Give us a little background into what those concerns might be.
Sure. It's funny, when I started my career in kashrus, I started off in Buffalo, New York, and there's a lot of dairies there. So I would say my training in kashrus might be in the dairy farms. So I follow that industry very well. It's a good point. Rav Moshe's heter of non sahadi, which Rav Moshe himself writes Baal Nefesh Yachmer, obviously. We're not going to talk about it, but there are things that I would say that come up, and it's changing in terms of things change in every industry, and certainly in the dairy industry, that if you keep Cholov Yisroel, you don't have to think or worry about these. And I'll give you some examples. I mean, the first most glaring one might be is the fact that the government themselves, it used to say the inspector had a piece of paper, he'd walk around, and one of the questions were, does the milk come from a sheep, goat, cow, or the kosher animals, okay? And that no longer is on. As a matter of fact, it was challenged by someone that wanted to open a factory or a business in California doing camel's milk. So they changed it to hooved animals, which a camel by the government is a hooved animal. Halacha, we know that it's not, but it is hooved. So they changed that. So that really starts with oh really? What's up with that? Now, if you look carefully into the government law, there still is labeling laws. There's still other sorts of things that would seemingly be okay, and that's what the agencies rely on in terms of. But you should know that when Rav Moshe wrote that, it was very much on the inspector's sheet, and it's no longer there. But again, without getting into the details, it still is halachically covered based on other laws and related laws. The second thing certainly is the DA cows, which I know you've spoken about in the past, and that's where they do a surgery, which makes a hole, and anything call it yotzim and a treifa. So certainly that's a sugya in the Cholov Yisroel farms. They take out any cow that had that surgery, that hole, so you don't have to worry about it. There's also, we mentioned Rav Moshe, but there's a famous machlokes Rav Moshe and the Pri Chodesh. Does it go by a non-sahadi, which is Rav Moshe, or the Pri Chodesh says it's more like even if there is benimsa Cholov Tmeya, but as long as it's way more expensive, and that's what Pri Chodesh. And there are some agencies, larger agencies, that actually rely on the Pri Chodesh. So they'll give hashgachas to milk in some countries that many other agencies won't touch because they follow Rav Moshe. So people should do their homework. I buy your product. I don't keep Cholov Yisroel. Are you following Rav Moshe? You're following Pri Chodesh? Obviously, if the Rav says to them, we follow Rav Moshe, not the Pri Chodesh. But those are also, it's not just Rav Moshe, this sugya.
And to clarify, because the other milk is more expensive, there's no incentive, or actually it disincentivizes them from using that milk in place of kosher cow's milk, for example.
Right. So I'll give you an example. I've spent some time in India, and over there it's a fascinating thing that goes on there, where at the end of the day, in these little shtetlich, the locals, they'll go and you can bring milk to the center of town, and they weigh it, and they give you rupees per the volume in exchange. but a lot of the shtetlich that are living zusammen, mamish, in the same house with their camels and their this and their that, who knows what's going on? It's you can research it. You'll see a very high level of fraud with the, and then a truck comes around, picks up the things. It's a bigger factory.
So all the smoke is getting mixed
all
together.
this. So again, there's different terim, this and that. There are some agencies that might give a hechsher to the casein coming out of that milk. The CRC doesn't, but there are some. So these are part of this. Again, if you keep Cholov Yisroel, you don't have to worry about that. Then there's different types. I'll tell you one or two other sugyas that I found, and that's actually making the cheese. Okay, when I started kashrus, cheese was made hard cheese. Hard cheese means that if you don't put in the rennet, it doesn't become like mozzarella, provolone, these things. There's something called soft cheese, which is farmer's cheese, cream cheese, ricotta cheese. That basically, if you let it sour by itself, will become that. They might put in rennet to quicken it, but that doesn't make it. The rennet hard cheese has to be gevinas Yisroel, where the Yisroel makes it kosher by making it gevino through the Yisroel. So when I started off in kashrus, basically the only way that we were doing it amongst the large agencies was the Yisroel was in the factory, and let's say it was a 24-hour, he'd be up, they'd wake him up, okay, we got to put in the rennet. So he'd go and put in the rennet, and that would be giving us Yisrael, which was a huge problem because you couldn't do these factories that are 24/7. You couldn't do Shabbos. Why not? Because making cheese on Shabbos is an Isser Boina, right? You couldn't do it. So a lot of factories, they couldn't become treif for a day and then kosher on Sunday. It just wasn't working. So it's just skip forward to today. That basically was like the shach. The shach says you have to put it in. There is a Ramah that talks about Re'iyah. And Re'iyah means that as long as the Yisrael is watching the guy put it in, which back in the day we didn't use the Ramah primarily, but now a lot of agencies, because of the practicality and for whatever reason, they've gone to the Ramah. Now there's a new thing where it's not necessarily having to see it, because you could be in a factory, there could be 25 vats being made, and there's a new thing called, we'll call it Yediyah. As long as, and I know some mashgiachas, as long as the mashgiach is comfortable that Yediyah Vadoyus, that the mashgiach is putting it, that the company is using kosher rennet, that's enough for them, and they're able to give hard cheese, whether it's string cheese, the various cheeses that are made from it, based on Yediyah Vadoyus. Again, if you look at the big picture, take a step back, and even from when I started in kashrus, 25 years ago, or whatever it is, 30 years ago, you're looking at, we'll call it a slippery slope. And each thing by itself, it's not my place to say anything negative about big poskim or big agencies at Chas v'Shalom. My point is, it's an interesting it's evolving. And one that keeps Cholov Yisroel, it's not loy benimsa, Cholov Yisroel cheese, like the shach, the mashgiach's putting it. There are many, many other examples. There's butter, which the Ramah famously says, there are, where it's fine. But today, what they put in butter is sometimes they put in whey cream. So it's whey cream comes from cheese. It can mamish be gvinas akum. So you have to know. There are many, many, many other examples. Time is short, but I wanted to give like a snapshot of the dairy industry and what some of the sugyas that come up, where agencies have to decide, and where someone that keeps Cholov Yisroel certainly avoids a lot of these things, and somebody that lives in areas where Cholov Yisroel is benimsa, what can we say? Certainly recommended. Like Rav Moshe says, Baal Nefesh Yad.